What is up, everybody? It's time for the bonus round. We have a bonus update to Standard with the banning and restricted announcement coming out just earlier today, and or maybe yesterday by the time this gets posted. But Wizards of the Coast officially has banned some things in Standard. We have 3 cards banned: Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Invoke Despair, and Reckoner Bankbuster. So they made a little statement about why they banned these cards and why they didn't ban other cards, sort of. So let's talk about what they said, and then I'll talk about some of my thoughts on how this will affect the format. And also we can talk about um, what I would like to see banned in the future, hopefully, because it seems like there might be a second chance at redemption. I hope, fingers crossed. So yeah, let's talk about it. Alrighty, so yeah, with the ban and restricted announcement, basically they said that they kind of reiterated what they said before, that people don't like bans. They feel bad when the things get banned because then their cards lose value, and I mean, of course, that feels bad. Cards losing value feels bad, but also they felt like they were too unpredictable with their bans. So even the people who might be willing to sell their cards, like, oh, Shieldred's really powerful, they could ban it, I should probably sell my Shieldreds. Like gives you some heads up that like you don't have to take the gamble if you want to just cash out now. Um, but so they're saying that they're going to kind of have a cadence, a schedule of when they're always going to do these bans, and they're going to try to only do it once a year. Though apparently, according to what they wrote here, this is not that once a year time, which is interesting because they made it seem like this was the once a year ban and they weren't going to do it again until next year. But when we get down to yeah, the very bottom of their statement here, they mentioned that they're going to do their once a year ban, their yearly ban, on August 7th, right before the Wilds of Eldraine comes out. So, um, basically, this is kind of like an early ban, I guess, because they feel like Standard has gotten a little bit unhealthy and a little bit stale, and they know that rotation's not coming, so they're trying to keep Standard, I guess, more fresh until the next set comes out. So yeah, this is kind of like a bonus ban, apparently, according to them. I mean, we all thought it was at our normal ban, but yeah. So we have a second chance if Standard doesn't change, if things don't seem good. We might get a second chance on August 7th for them to ban the other cards that need to be removed. And I really hope they do, though knowing Wizards, they'll probably, like wimp out and only ban maybe one at most card, something like that. And it's going to be sad. We all know it's not going to be what we want. And the fake bans that we saw were definitely really nice, but it seems like that's not happening. So yeah, they banned 3 cards. The reasons they gave for banning these cards, they said that Fable was too flexible. It does everything, which is basically what we all knew. It has like 3 different modes, and all modes are good, and so you can put it in every single deck. So yeah, of course that one was gonna get banned. We all knew that. Bankbuster, they said, um, it's too flexible. Is the reason why they banned this one. They said card draw in any color means that this can go into any deck, and it makes it so that you don't have to make any decisions about your card draw on your decks, which I think is the right call. I think in the like white control decks, people run this because it's just free card draw in white, which is pretty rare. Um, maybe even in we didn't really see much green or Gruul decks, but in Gruul decks it would make sense to put this because it's aggressive, it draws cards. Green and red typically don't have good card draw, so yeah, you could put it in there. So it kind of fits everywhere. Anything that's not an aggro deck, I would say, you would put Bankbuster into it because it's just a card draw that's good. So yeah, that's why they banned that one. And then Invoke Despair, they said that it was too powerful, is what they said. They said it's the curve topper for every black and black red deck. because it just does too much for the mana cost. So um, I don't know for sure if it does too much. I guess it does too much. I think the main problem with the Invoke Despair was that it deals damage to the opponent. I think if they had worded it to deal damage to the caster, like every single other black card draw spell in existence, then that would have made the card more balanced, because then you're paying the price. Yes, you have flexible removal, but you're losing life in the process, and it would have evened out a lot more. So I think that's really the problem, is that they tuned the knobs way too far ahead on that one, instead of kind of sticking to the formula that we've had work for a long time. Every time black draws a card, they lose a life. That was what we always were accustomed to, and I don't know why they changed it on this card, as well as making it also enchantment removal, something they don't do very often in black. So those two things, yeah, it makes sense that it was good. So yeah, these three banned. So how is that going to change standard? I think pretty clearly there's a lot of things you couldn't do before, because these cards would kind of warp that. So especially Invoke Despair. As much as I don't think it was like, I don't think it is as egregious as the Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. I mean, it's still a good card. Don't get me wrong. It's still a 3-for-1 pretty much every time. But this one is very format warping, I would say, because it kills planeswalkers, it kills enchantments. Basically, people were forcing themselves to try to always have an enchantment on the board, because they want the Invoke Despair not to do the damage and draw the opponent a card. So they were trying to figure out ways to have creatures and enchantments down for relatively low cost or free cost, um, in order to mitigate the Invoke Despair, the abilities of the Invoke Despair. So that's why you saw a lot of like enchantment removal that would, it would get rid of the Kiki-Jiki token, and then it would sit on the battlefield, and then it could be sacked to the Invoke Despair, because that would be a way to mitigate the Invoke Despair's value. Or people playing, their own Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, because it creates a creature and an enchantment, and that mitigates the Invoke Despair cost. People played Wedding Announcement because it creates a creature and an enchantment that would mitigate the Invoke Despair cost. So, um, even Wandering Emperor, for example, like it creates a planeswalker and a creature, so it mitigates the Invoke Despair value. So all of these things that we probably didn't even realize were getting played, because Invoke Despair was like such a dominant card in the format. And I think only recently did we see people start to move away from Invoke Despair when the Breach the Multiverse came out, because it was relatively fast enough. It could get enough value off of it that, even though people were invoking, they were drawing cards, but you were just killing the opponent with big creatures and big Traxxas to draw a bunch of cards, the tallies to get a bunch of value. So you were able to generate more value with the Breach than they did with Invoke Despair, which is why we started to see it shifting away from that. So yeah, I think with Invoke on, you don't have to have the enchantments, you don't have to have the planeswalkers that generate tokens and things like that. You're not so worried about your bigger enchantments getting removed. That was the other downside, is you wanted to play these like value enchantments, but you don't want to play big expensive enchantments because they would just get killed. Same thing for planeswalkers. Any planeswalker that didn't make like a creature or generate some really good value when it first entered couldn't be played, because the opponent would just kill it and then draw 2 cards with their Invoke Despair. So we might see some of the other, maybe even like the green planeswalkers, Nissa or Ren or something like that. We might see some of those get played, because Invoke Despair is gone and it can't kill them as easily. I don't know what other planeswalkers might. Maybe Teferi could get played more. Teferi was already pretty good, so maybe. Sorin could get played more. I think any planeswalker that's kind of a 2-for-1 now doesn't get killed by an Invoke Despair, so might make that really, might make it too good, if I'm being honest. Like now Sorin comes down, it makes the vampire and the opponent can't just invoke Despair to kill the vampire and the Sorin. So it's gonna mean that the opponent's removal spells are gonna have to do it, or the Sorin's gonna live and you're gonna generate value. So yeah, it could really affect things, especially with the Planeswalkers. And big enchantments are gonna be harder to destroy now, remove now, except for in white. So I'm thinking we're gonna see a farewell meta, basically like Sunfall and Farewell decks, which these giant like sweeper decks. That's probably going to be the control deck of choice. Is just these like decks that can just remove enchantments easily. And then we'll probably see Esper Legends crop up because it was already really good and it lost nothing. And in fact, the only thing that Esper Legends would lose to was these Invoke Despair decks. So now that they're gone, um, yeah, Esper Legends. But I think the Farewell and Sunfall decks can deal with the Legends decks pretty well, so that's why I kind of think both of those will crop up. And then we have the ramp decks. I kind of think the ramp decks will die. I know people might not believe that, and it might not be true, but I think the reason the ramp decks were good is because aggro couldn't survive in the format. So if we see the Invoke Despair and Fable and Bankbuster gone, that's cutting out a lot of the Rakdos Grixis mid-range power. And I really think Esper Legends is just going to take over as like the #1 deck. And then we'll see some decks which have to deal with the Esper Legends, like control decks. But Esper Legends, I think, is fast enough to beat the 5-color ramp. So yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Legends is going to push out the ramp decks, and then we'll have some control decks, and we might have some soldiers decks also in there, which can go under the Esper a little bit. So that's my predictions. Let me know what you think, and yeah, I guess what other cards would I want to get banned in August? I think Wedding Announcement, Rafine, and honestly Thalia. Like I think I said that in a previous video, but like Thalia really hoses so much of the format, but I don't think Wizards of the Coast is going to realize that and be smart enough to ban it. So I think most likely the only thing we might see banned is Wedding Announcement or maybe Farewell, if Farewell really does become super dominant. So yeah, that'll be my predictions. WoTC in August is going to ban Wedding Announcement and Farewell, and that's it. That's my predictions. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. What do you think of these bans? Do you think it's gonna make a difference? We'll see. Anyway, till next time. See ya.